Okay, I am very excited to introduce our next keynote speaker. Philippe Botteri is from Accel Partners. He has worked in the technology industry for 14 years, mostly in Silicon Valley. His focus has primarily been on cloud computing, SaaS, and internet sectors. Philippe, vieni qua. Non vuoi parlare italiano? Thank you very much.
We live in uncertain times. I mean, if you look at what's happening today, when you look at Europe today, you hear about debt, you hear about the crisis, the euro crisis. When you look at China, you hear about growth slowing down. I mean, the GDP growth in China was, in double digit last year. This year now we are at 7%. Who knows where it's going to be next year? If you look at countries like Turkey, the GDP growth was 7-8% last year. Now it's 4%. There is an extremely high level of volatility in our economies today. And if in the past we could think about economic cycle that were going up or down every 5 years, when the economy was driven by only, mostly by the US, which was only one pole, and the global economy was following the US cycle. Today, the world is different. Today, you have many cycles. Today, you have India, you have China, you have Eastern Europe. You still have, of course, Western Europe and the US, and they all evolve with different economic cycles. And so today, everything becomes very volatile and very unpredictable. On the other side, the pace at which technology is evolving has never been as fast as today. I mean, if you look at what happened in the past couple of years, there's probably as much that happened in a decade before. We see an incredible pace of innovation. I mean, we see some great things on the public markets as well. I'm sure you have heard about the Workday IPO, which is this big cloud company, now valued at $4 billion. The stock went up 75% on the opening. I mean, other IPO earlier this year, like companies like Eloqua or ServiceNow, which are companies which are north of $1 billion in valuation. I mean, their stock have been up 40 to 50% in the past year. So at the same time, we see very exciting trends in technology, and we do tend to believe that technology is a silver lining in these times that seems to be uncertain. And we do believe at Accel that Eastern Europe is part of this exciting story of technology. And that's why I wanted to be here today. So just maybe getting back a bit on my background. So I started my career as first engineering studies in France, as you probably have guessed from the accent. Started my career with McKinsey & Company, helped serve technology clients both in Europe and the United States. And then I moved to serve a much smaller company when I joined Bessemer Venture Partners in Palo Alto. Several years back now. And when I was there, I focused my time in particular on both looking at US and European champion in the technology space. So I invested in cloud companies like Cornerstone On Demand and Eloqua, or European companies like Criteo, which is an ad retargeting company that has been growing pretty fast. And then, based in the US, I saw what was happening in Europe. And I was thinking, I said, well, am I really missing something here? I mean, it looks like now this is Europe's time, both Western and Eastern Europe. I was seeing a lot of opportunity there. And then I decided to come back, and I joined Accel Partner about 18 months ago in their London office, where I'm focusing on European investments. I've made a few investments since I joined a company like DocuSign, which is a cloud company providing e-signature, or a company like BlaBlaCar or HouseTrip, which are building on the collaborative consumption trends, with BlaBlaCar being a ride-sharing company and HouseTrip being a flat rental company. So just a few words about Accel. So we are a global platform. So we were born 30 years ago in the US. We are now expanding into Europe, India, and China. And from the London office, we cover all of Europe, which went from Ireland to Russia, going south as Turkey or Middle East and Africa. We are a stage agnostic firm, so we invest everything from a few $100,000 to seed companies, and we can do up to $50 to $100 million checks for growth equity companies. And we want to be active investors, so we typically would take a board seat in our company and help them either by hiring talents, help them expand internationally, outside of their home country, be it in Europe or in the US. And since our beginning, we had more than 230 exits, so we've been pretty fortunate. So just a quick word overall on the areas that we're focusing on and some of the companies in our portfolio. So the first thing on software, we are focusing on big data and cloud computing, and I'll tell you a bit more about this later today. We invest in companies like Dropbox that I hope some of you are using, ClickTech on the BI side, or Cloudera, which is leveraging Hadoop. We are fairly active in gaming as well with companies like Angry Birds. So I hope you have all wasted a lot of time on this game. Company like Playfish or Mind Candy. I mean, Mind Candy is just an online game for kids, but probably today, 2 kids out of 3 between 6 to 12 years old in the UK have created an account. So the penetration we see is really amazing. Other trend, mobile, of course, and I'm going to tell you more about that. Social with companies like Spotify, Facebook. Next generation e-commerce with Wonga, diapers, BlaBlaCar, and obviously emerging markets. And so as I said, we've been in India and China, but also very active in Eastern Europe with companies like Avito and Kupi VIP. And we think that Europe is going to play an increasing role in the funds going forward. I mean, with the great things happening in Eastern Europe, in particular, I'm going to give you 3 reasons why we really like this geography. I mean, the first one, if you look at this chart, I mean, last year, this chart was different. I mean, last year, Runet was only the number 2 largest internet market in Europe. Today, I'm very happy to see that it is number 1. It is number 1, and it is still growing double digits. So Germany is only growing at 2%. So next year, you will see this bar getting higher and higher. I mean, given how underpenetrated the market is, with only, it's 37, I mean, 35, let's say 35 to 40% today. So there is a potential. If you look at the other benchmark at 70% in Eastern Europe, you see a potential to double that in the next few years. And we think that is a very exciting opportunity. Just looking more globally at the region in Eastern Europe, I mean, we think it is a very exciting region. There are more than 400 million people, so it is a very, very large consumer market. I mean, the GDP is north of $3 trillion, so it's a very, very sizable. And in addition, it's growing pretty fast, with most of the countries are growing 2 to 5% per year, which is much higher than what you hear in other countries in Western Europe when people are starting to talk about potential negative GDP growth. If you look at the e-commerce market, just looking at Russia alone, it's an 11 billion e-commerce market, and it's expected to more than, probably double in the next few years. So again, lots of opportunity here. One fact that I found particularly interesting about the region is that the penetration of mobile phone is very high. I mean, it's one of the largest in the world. You have 1.7 mobile phone per person, which is a record high. If you compare Germany and most Western European countries are 1.2. Brazil is 1.3, and India and China are under 1. So that's an incredible asset base that you entrepreneur can leverage to build exciting businesses. And last but not least, you have an exceptional talent pool. I mean, you are the region that puts the first man in space 50 years ago, and you have this tradition of having great engineers, people who are great in math and algorithm, And these are things that are becoming more and more important in today's technology. If you think about, how company gets started today, I mean, in the past, you needed to go to a VC, raise a few $1 million, buy servers. It was very, very difficult to build and start a company. So you may be a great engineer, but if you're in a small town in Ukraine, then how do you get access to capital? How do you realize your ambition? I mean, today it's becoming very easy because with cloud computing technologies and all the open source stack that is available out there, now you can start a company with just a few $1,000s, or it is very cheap. So now you have this incredible pool of talents that now can unleash its ambition thanks to the new technologies available, and that we believe is going to change the landscape in Eastern Europe. I mean, just one witness, one just testimony of this, the success of this talent pool is if you look at the Facebook hackathon in 2012, it was won by an Eastern European team, which is pretty fantastic. And the last reason why we really like Eastern Europe, it's because it has created a lot of big champions, very, very successful technology companies. I mean, you're all familiar with the name on this board. And we like to classify this technology champion in two categories. So we have on one side what we call the home champions, which are companies that are taking advantage of the size of their domestic market to create a dominant position. I mean, we typically see these companies in internet or e-commerce, which have winner-take-all dynamics, where you can build an internet brand and get free traffic over time after you have invested to get these customers, and that are actually giving you a leadership and very profitable businesses. So that's one category. You all know companies like Yandex and Mail.ru, which are worth $8 billion. Company like Avito or Kupi VIP. In the internet side, there is a potential in the region to create very, very successful home champion. And it's not only Russia. I mean, if you look at Allegro in Poland, it's been a very successful business as well. And I could go on and on this list. So that's one area where we think there are tremendous opportunities, just being a champion in your own market. And then the second category is the category of global talents. I mean, the global champions, they are from scratch addressing a global market. So they are taking advantage of the huge engineering pool that you have and the great technology talent that you have here in Eastern Europe to create a unique IP. And then they take this IP, create the development team in the local country, and then they sell it worldwide. And in the past, I mean, if you look 20 years ago, 10 years ago, when it was typical enterprise software sale, it was harder to do. I mean, when you created a great product and you're sitting in the Czech Republic and you're like, okay, now I want to go and sell this in the US, it is not an easy job. But today with cloud computing and SaaS, now you can actually, all your customers can access your software online, can discover you online. I mean, you look at companies like Evernote, where a lot of their traffic is coming from the world, but it's self-sign-up, that you don't have this barrier of initially going abroad. Obviously, over time, that's where you want to go, and even companies like Evernote now selling into enterprise, they need to build their sales team, but that can come as a second step. So we do believe that this is radically changing the dynamic for these global champions. So I've put here a few names that we see in obviously software and security, but also in gaming and of course mobile, that is starting to become very strong now. So let's talk about now where are we going to find the next generation of champion. I mean, the first area I wanted to mention today is big data. I mean, you've heard about big data. Everyone knows about big data. But what is really interesting about big data is that it is really, really big. And it is big beyond what you can imagine. I just wanted to lay out here a few facts to show how big this can be. I mean, there are already today close to 250 billion emails sent every day, just 250 billion. So of course, 80% of that is spam. But even if you take out the 80%, the 20% is still very big. Today it takes only $600 to buy a hard drive where you can store the entire world music library. I mean, this is pretty amazing. I mean, talk about starting a business on a shoestring. On Facebook today, there's 30 billion pieces of content shared every month. The amount of data is projected to go 40% every year in the next few years. And by 2020, that means it's going to be, 40 to 50 times what it is today. So, I mean, these are just amazing facts that tells you how large and how big is big data. So let's see, how does this create opportunities for entrepreneurs? We like to think of big data along what we call the 4 V's. I mean, there are volume, velocity, variety, and value. So, I mean, the volume, I mentioned it. I mean, it's the sheer volume of data is coming from, everything generated by machines, by weblogs, by social media, by mobile phones. So all the things we talk about everything today is generating an incredible amount of data. I mean, as we speak, you look at this Twitter feed here, and you see that the amount of data that is being generated in real time. And the big difference with this data, and today's data and yesterday's data, is yesterday's data was mostly structured data that you could put in a relational database. Today, a lot of the data, and most of the data, if you look at the projection, 70% of the data is completely unstructured data, like the tweets you're seeing here. And this creates, obviously, very different challenges. The next thing is about velocity. I mean, if you look at the old BI world, if you wanted to have access to some data, I mean, first you need to create a giant cube. Then if you are, a business leader, you want to have access to some of the information, then you need to write a request to your IT department that is going to get back and say, oh, that's not possible. Then you're going to go back to them and say, yes, I think it's possible. They say, okay, it's possible, but it's going to take time. And then it's going to take, a few weeks. They're going to write queries, and at, 1 month later, if you're lucky, you're going to see what you want to do. And then you're like, okay, now how does this evolve now that we're 1 month later? And say, okay, well, you'll know in 1 month. I mean, today, the world is moving fast. People want real-time information. I mean, if I look at the tweets here, I'm like, so what is said today about Accel on the Twittersphere? What is the sentiment? Is it positive? Is it negative? And I want to know that now because I can still do things to change it in real time. So we think that this is going to create opportunities in storage. So how do you create the next generation of storage company? The next opportunities around data management. How do you cleanse the data? How do you make the data easy to access and easy to query so you can basically have real-time information? Create new platforms and new architecture like Hadoop. It's going to create a next generation of BI company and obviously a next generation of business companies, business applications that are going to help businesses take advantage of the value of big data. The next trend I wanted to mention quickly is cloud computing. I mean, you all know cloud computing. You all know the 3 layers with, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service, and how that's evolved in the past 6-7 years. But if you look at the cloud computing world today, you have a lot of disrupting forces that are changing the dynamic. I mean, you have new devices like tablets and phone, and then suddenly, you were used to build a web-based software, and now you need to build native application for mobile phone. So that's a big challenge. And all the UI you have designed, all the way the workflow and the processes were designed in your application are now changing, and you need to make them different for easy access on tablet and mobile. So that, you have private and hybrid cloud to manage now. You have, obviously, as I mentioned, big data. So how do I fit all my big data with my cloud infrastructure? And virtualization, which moved from server to desktop and is creating new challenges. So we do believe that we're going to see in the next few years, and we are seeing this next generation of cloud company, and we expect several of them to come from Eastern Europe. So finally, the last trend I wanted to mention here is mobile. But not mobile as only a smartphone. I mean, I'm thinking of mobile as the next generation of computing platform. I mean, if you look at this graph, what is interesting, if you see in the past 50 years how the technology has evolved. I mean, ranging from mainframe, which were large computer, you were selling maybe 1 million units if you were very successful. They were costing millions of dollars, and some of them would fit in the side of this room. And now you forward it 50 years, and 50 years later, now you can carry much more power in your pocket. I mean, this is a computing platform. This is not a phone. This is a next-generation computing platform. The cost has been divided, by many order of magnitudes. You can expect to have probably 10 billion of these devices out there if you include, the smartphone, the tablets, electronics in car, game console, e-books. This is going to create enormous opportunities for entrepreneurs. And if you look at how this is going to change our life, I mean, this is going to impact, when you think about it as a computing platform, then every area that was changed by software is going to be changed by mobile phone. But even more, because now you have geolocation, you have mobility, you're carrying this device everywhere. So that's going to even increase the scope of opportunities. And it's going to be transportation, it's going to be travel, it's going to be payments, it's going to be productivity, it's going to be gaming. And the great things about mobile is that now you can have access to distribution very easily because you have only 2 distribution channels. You have an Android store and you have an Apple store. So yes, they are taking a 30% cut, but you don't need to worry about managing hundreds of distributors to have to spread your technology. So that's an amazing advantage, and that is changing the speed at which these businesses develop. I just wanted to conclude by one striking example from our portfolio, which is a company called Supercell. So maybe some of you have played with their games, Clash of Clans and Heydays. But these 2 games, within a couple of months, they are now in the top, both games are in the top 5 grossing app on the US App Store, all category included. This company went from 0 to $500,000 in sales per day in a few months. That's a $180 million annual run rate. I mean, how many companies in the past could reach that growth in such a short period of time? I don't think there is any. I mean, we are seeing things that are really, really amazing. And this concludes my presentation. I think we see Eastern Europe being a key reservoir of all these talents and entrepreneurs. We expect you to leverage all these trends and build a successful company. And we want to be at your side to help you fund and create successful businesses. Thank you.